The remnants of humanity had scattered across the galaxy, hidden from the galaxy's dominant powers, surviving in the shadows. Earth, once the cradle of their civilization, had been lost to them, a distant memory, a myth to most of the cosmos. The Watchers, a coalition of alien species, had come centuries ago, obliterating Earth's defenses and forcing humanity into exile. For generations, they had fought to survive, living in the fringes of galactic space, struggling to rebuild, but they had never forgotten Earth. Among the exiles was Captain Celine Talaris, a former fleet commander who now led the last remnants of humanity's military force. Her fleet, known as the Horizon Battalion, had no home to return to, just the unyielding desire to find Earth again. For years, they had scoured the farthest corners of the galaxy, piecing together old records and ancient texts, hoping to find a way back to their ancestral planet. Their efforts had been in vain, until now. In an old, forgotten archive on a desolate moon, Celine's team discovered something extraordinary, a cryptic message encoded in a long-lost human language. After months of deciphering, they realized that Earth had not been destroyed. It had been hidden, sealed away in an unknown part of space. This revelation sent shockwaves through the Resistance. Earth still existed, but it was lost to them, tucked away in the most unreachable corner of the galaxy. The message also hinted at a key, an ancient artifact that could unlock the coordinates to Earth's hiding place. Celine's heart raced as she read the final line, "Find the key, unlock the path to Sol." The hope she had long suppressed flared within her. The chance to reclaim their home, their legacy, had finally arrived. But there was no time to waste. The Watchers were always watching. The aliens who had exiled humanity from their birthplace were not content to leave them alone. They feared humanity's potential, their unyielding spirit, and the power that Earth had once held. The Watchers had known of the Resistance's search for Earth, and now their worst fear was becoming a reality. Humanity was about to reclaim their birthright. Celine knew that the road ahead would be perilous. The Watchers would do everything in their power to stop them, but the Resistance was determined. They had faced odds far greater than this and had never faltered. Earth was worth any sacrifice. The first test came quickly. A fleet of Watcher ships appeared on the horizon, a silent and ominous force closing in. The battle was inevitable. Celine gathered her senior officers in the command center of their flagship, the Liberty's Flame. "Prepare for battle," she said, her voice steady despite the rising tension. "They won't let us leave here alive, but we will fight. We will show them that humanity will never be erased." As the Watcher's fleet advanced, Celine's mind raced. The artifact, the key to finding Earth, was hidden on a distant world, far from the reach of the Watchers. Their only hope was to escape this trap, steal the artifact, and unlock the path to Sol. She stared out the viewport, watching as the enemy ships grew larger in the dark void of space. This was only the beginning. "Helm, take us out, full speed," Celine commanded. The Liberty's Flame roared to life, breaking through the void as the crew prepared for the battle that would determine humanity's future. The fight was on, and Celine knew that their survival would depend on every ounce of courage they had left. The stars ahead, once a symbol of despair, now shone as the guiding light to humanity's future. Earth was waiting, if they could make it past the Watchers. The battle had been brutal. The Watchers' fleet, though smaller, was highly advanced, and the Horizon Battalion had paid dearly for their escape. The Liberty's Flame had been damaged in the skirmish, and several of the smaller vessels in the fleet had been destroyed. But despite the losses, the humans had managed to slip through the enemy's grasp, retreating into deep space, far from the prying eyes of the Watchers. In the aftermath, Celine stood in the war room of their flagship, staring at the scattered holographic displays of their fleet's status. The fleet was battered, but it was alive. More importantly, they had accomplished something remarkable. They had escaped. However, Celine knew that the hardest part was still ahead. "Captain, the fleet's morale is beginning to crack," said Lieutenant Rena Voss, Celine's right hand. Rena's sharp eyes flicked to the gathered officers. We've been running for too long. The crew wants to strike back. They want to fight, not hide in the shadows anymore. Celine nodded, her face grim. She understood the frustration. The resistance had been in exile for centuries, and now that they had a real chance to reclaim Earth, they were facing internal divisions. The stakes had never been higher, and the pressure was beginning to show. "We're not hiding," Celine replied, her voice strong despite the doubt gnawing at her. "We're biding our time. The artifact is still out there, and we need it to unlock the coordinates to Earth. If we strike out too soon, we risk losing everything." Rena glanced at the others around the table, her expression hardening. "We've lost enough already. It's time we take the fight to the Watchers. If they're going to stop us, we should make them regret it." There were murmurs of agreement from the officers, and Celine could feel the weight of the room shifting. It was clear that there was growing support for a direct assault, one that would force the Watchers to respond. But Celine wasn't so sure. While she shared the longing for revenge, the situation was far more complicated. "The artifact is more important than any fight we can win right now," Celine said firmly. "If we lose it, Earth remains unreachable, and we're all dead. The Watchers have already shown they won't hesitate to stop us. We need to be smarter than they are." At that moment, the hologram of Commander Eli Draven flickered to life. He was the captain of one of the fleet's remaining heavy cruisers, the Ascendant, and a fierce warrior who believed in fighting fire with fire. His face was set, a hard edge to his voice as he spoke. "Captain, with all due respect, waiting isn't an option," Draven said, his tone sharp. "We know where the artifact is. We have enough intelligence to get in and extract it. And if we don't move now, the Watchers will track us down before we're ready. We need to strike them first, take control of the space around the artifact, and secure it." Celine clenched her fists, considering the risk. Draven was right about one thing. The longer they waited, the more the Watchers would close in on them. But Celine couldn't ignore the bigger picture. If they attacked now, they might gain the artifact, but they could lose everything else. "We'll need more than just the fleet," she said, her voice cold with resolve. "We need to gather more intelligence. We'll go to the closest human colony on Delphos 7. The people there might have information on the artifact's location, and they might be willing to help us." Draven's eyes narrowed, and for a moment, Celine saw the tension in his expression. Delphos 7 was a rough, unregulated world, far from the ideals the Resistance had once fought for. Its inhabitants had long given up hope of reclaiming Earth, but it was their best lead. "Fine," Draven said reluctantly, his anger still simmering. "But we don't have time to waste. If we don't strike now, we might never get another chance." Celine's decision was made. She turned to Rena. "Prepare a team. We leave for Delphos 7 in the morning." As the officers filed out, Celine stood alone in the war room, staring at the star-filled map of the galaxy. She knew this path would lead them into the heart of the storm. The Watchers were relentless, and the artifact was the key to everything. But she also knew that their fractured alliance would either hold or crumble in the face of what was coming. The people of Delphos 7 were their last hope. If they didn't have the answers they needed, they would be out of time, and possibly out of options. The clock was ticking, and with every moment, the stakes grew higher. And yet, deep in her chest, a spark of something else ignited, something stronger than fear or doubt. Hope. The path to Sol was within reach, and humanity was ready to take it. The Liberty's flame made its way toward Delphos 7, a remote colony world nestled at the edge of known space. The journey was long, the void between stars feeling even more suffocating as the crew recovered from the brutal skirmish with the Watchers. While the fleet limped along, Celine's thoughts were consumed by the decision to reach out to Delphos 7. The inhabitants there had long given up on the idea of ever returning to Earth, believing it was lost forever. But Celine had no choice. Time was running out, and the artifact was the key to everything. As they approached the barren, war-torn world, the ship's sensors lit up with signs of life, scattered, fragmented signals that indicated a presence, but not the kind of thriving, organized colonies one might expect. Delphos 7 had become a haven for smugglers, pirates, and outcasts, humanity's forgotten ones. Their hope was scarce, their lives driven by survival, not by lofty ideals. It was a place where power and wealth ruled, and alliances were as fragile as the atmosphere above the planet's surface. Captain, Rena said, standing beside her in the command center, scanning the planet. It's a mess down there, no real order. The colonists are divided into factions, and their loyalty can be bought. If we don't tread carefully, we'll end up with more enemies than allies. Celine's gaze hardened as she studied the planet's surface on the holomap. They needed the information, and Delphos 7 was their only lead. We don't need allies. We need answers. We're going in, full stealth mode until we have the intel. The Liberty's flame descended into the atmosphere, its hull flickering with the faint remnants of the recent battle scars. As the ship touched down in a shadowed industrial district, the crew began preparations for what promised to be a dangerous operation. Celine, Rena, and a hand-picked team of elite operatives, including the grizzled veteran Commander Eli Draven, disembarked and made their way through the rundown streets. The air was thick with smog, and the dark alleys echoed with the sounds of bartering, combat, and uncertainty. Their first stop was a rundown cantina that served as the hub for the most dangerous people on Delphos 7. Celine pushed through the door, her presence commanding attention despite the casual demeanor she tried to maintain. At a table near the back, a man with a scared face and a reputation for knowing everything about the underworld sat waiting. He was a former officer from Earth, one of the many who had been exiled when the Watchers arrived. Darius, Celine greeted him, her voice steady but carrying an edge of urgency. We need to talk. The man, Darius Vance, smirked as he looked up from his drink. His cold, calculating eyes locked onto Celine's. I thought you lot were all dead, he said, his tone rough. But then again, it's always the ones we think are gone that come back to haunt us. We're looking for something, Celine continued, her eyes narrowing. An artifact. It holds the coordinates to Earth, our home. We need to find it before the Watchers do. Darius raised an eyebrow, a slight laugh escaping his lips. The Watchers? So they finally realized you survived. What makes you think I'm gonna help you after all these years of pretending Earth was just a fairy tale? Celine leaned in, her voice low and serious. Because if you don't, the Watchers will come for you too. If you want to keep hiding, you better start thinking about what happens when they decide it's time to wipe this place clean. The threat wasn't subtle, but it was necessary. Darius might be a cynic, but he knew better than to ignore the power of the Watchers. He sighed, as if weighing his options, before nodding slowly. All right, I'll help, he said, his voice laced with a grudging respect. But I want something in return. You can't expect me to just hand over something this valuable without a price. Celine didn't hesitate. Name it. I want a ship off this rock, a fresh start, away from the mess you're dragging me into. Deal, Celine agreed without hesitation. They didn't have time to argue. Darius's eyes glinted with the promise of a dangerous bargain as he slid a small data chip across the table. The artifact you're looking for? It's hidden in a vault, one of the few places on this planet that hasn't been looted. It's not just any vault. Its security is linked to something old, something from Earth. Celine snatched the chip, her pulse quickening. This was it. The first real lead they'd had. But the danger wasn't over yet. Darius wasn't the only one with eyes on that artifact, and now they had a target on their backs. The Watchers had surely sensed their movement, and they wouldn't be far behind. As the team made their way back to the ship, Celine knew that every step from here on out would be fraught with peril. Delphos 7 had provided them with answers, but those answers came at a cost. The fight for Earth was no longer just a struggle for survival. It was a race against time, and the stakes were higher than ever. The path to Sol was no longer just a distant dream, it was a mission, and humanity's survival depended on it. But first, they had to survive Delphos 7, and with every passing moment, they knew the Watchers were closing in. The Liberty's flame rose from Delphos 7's atmosphere, leaving the polluted industrial district behind. Selene stood at the command deck, staring out at the cold vastness of space. The data chip from Darius was secure in her hand, but the road ahead felt like an endless series of obstacles. The vault, where the artifact was hidden, was rumored to be in one of the most dangerous sectors of the planet, an old military facility left over from humanity's first wave of colonization. Its security was advanced, and its location was known only to a select few. Darius's information was solid, but it would be up to Selene and her crew to navigate the labyrinthine tunnels and defenses. The Liberty's flame flew on a tight course toward the facility, its stealth systems cloaking them from any prying sensors. The ship's engines hummed with quiet precision, its presence nearly undetectable as it cut through the silence of the deep space. The mission had taken on a new urgency. Every passing moment was one closer to the Watchers discovering their trail. The artifact was their only chance to find Earth again. It was all or nothing now. "Captain," Rena's voice broke through Selene's thoughts. "We've got a problem. A ship just dropped out of hyperspace on an intercept course. It's Watcher design, and it's fast." Selene's heart skipped a beat. The Watchers had already tracked them. How much time until they reach us? "Less than 20 minutes, Rena replied, her tone tense. "At their current speed, they'll catch up with us before we can reach the vault." "We can't outrun them," Selene muttered, her mind racing. They had no choice but to make a stand. "Prepare the fleet for battle. We'll need to buy time for the team on the ground." Rena nodded and relayed the orders. The fleet was already strained from their previous engagement, but Selene had no other options. The Watchers were relentless, and they had a single goal: to eliminate any threat to their control over the galaxy. If they didn't succeed in finding Earth, humanity would remain forever scattered, doomed to live in the shadows. Meanwhile, on the surface of Delphos 7, the team was preparing for the most dangerous part of the mission. Selene, Rena, Draven, and a small squad of elite operatives made their way to a covert landing zone not far from the military facility. The planet's surface was an arid wasteland, scarred by wars long past. The facility they were targeting was well guarded, with old automated defenses still active and mercenaries from various factions who had no love for the resistance. "We'll need to disable the perimeter security before we can get inside," Draven said, his voice low as they approached the facility's outer walls. His rugged face was set in a permanent scowl, his hands gripping the weapon at his side. "Understood," Selene replied. "Stay sharp. If anyone knows we're here before we get the artifact, we'll be walking into a massacre." The team moved like shadows, staying out of sight of both the remaining automated turrets and the mercenaries. Their progress was slow, but deliberate. Every step was calculated, every corner watched carefully. It felt as though the entire planet was holding its breath, waiting for them to make the wrong move. They reached the first of the facility's security doors, a massive metal barrier designed to withstand almost any attack. Rena moved forward, deploying a small device that would scramble the facility's defensive systems long enough for them to gain entry. The seconds stretched into eternity as they waited for the system to come online. "Done," Rena whispered. "The system is down for 3 minutes. Let's move." They slipped inside, entering the bowels of the facility. The air was stale, the corridors cold and metallic. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the faint hum of the facility's power systems. They passed through several halls, each one more claustrophobic than the last. The walls were lined with the remnants of a past civilization, old equipment, abandoned offices, and darkened storage rooms that hadn't seen light in decades. At the heart of the facility was the vault, a massive door reinforced with layers of ancient security measures. Celine's breath caught as she saw it. This was it, the final obstacle between them and the artifact. But as they approached, a quiet alarm began to echo through the halls, and Celine realized they were not alone. Someone's activated the security systems, Rena hissed, scanning the area. They're coming. Get to the vault now, Celine barked. The team sprinted toward the door, but the echoing footsteps of armed guards grew louder with each passing second. They were out of time. Rena and Raven worked quickly to hack into the vault's security, but the clock was ticking. The Watcher's ship was closing in, and their window of opportunity was shrinking. Every second was a gamble. Almost there, Rena said, her voice tense as she manipulated the control panel. If they're not here in 2 minutes, we'll have access. But just as the countdown reached its final seconds, the first guard appeared, stepping out from an adjoining corridor, weapon raised. Celine's heart raced as she prepared for the worst. The fate of humanity was within their grasp, but so was disaster. The guard's eyes locked onto Celine as he raised his weapon. Time seemed to slow. The echoes of his heavy boots reverberated off the cold metal walls, and Celine's pulse thudded in her ears. She had only one chance to ensure their survival. She dove behind a nearby column, her hand instinctively reaching for her blaster, the weight of the weapon solid and familiar in her grip. "Take cover," she yelled, the order cutting through the tense air like a razor. Her team scattered, seeking shelter behind the towering support structures of the facility. Draven was already in motion, moving with a fluidity born of countless battles. His combat instincts were second nature, and he didn't hesitate as he slid into position to flank the guard. The guard shouted into his comms, but before he could fire, Draven's blaster spoke first. A beam of red energy lanced out, striking the guard square in the chest. He crumpled to the ground with a strangled cry, his weapon skittering across the floor. "One down," Draven muttered, his voice cold. "Keep moving." Celine's heart raced as they continued toward the vault. The sound of approaching footsteps echoed through the hallways, now joined by more guards, alerted by the disruption. They would be outnumbered soon, and the clock was ticking on Rena's attempt to crack the vault's security. "Rena," Celine barked, "how much longer?" Rena's eyes flicked to the countdown timer displayed on her wrist console, her brow furrowed in concentration. 30 seconds. I need 30 seconds, she replied, her voice tight with focus. The team fanned out to provide cover, taking positions at every exit and corridor leading into the vault's chamber. Celine felt the weight of every moment pressing down on her. If they failed, if Rena didn't get the door open, everything they had fought for would be lost. The artifact, the key to Earth, would slip further from their grasp. Another guard appeared from a side passage, his blaster leveled at Celine. She dove to the side, narrowly avoiding the blast, and fired back, her shot hitting him square in the chest. He dropped instantly, the smell of burnt ozone thick in the air. But the sound of more boots approaching told her this would not be the last. "Rena now!" Celine shouted again, already shifting her weight to prepare for another assault. With a final, sharp hiss, the massive vault door slid open. The sound of grinding metal was deafening, but it was music to Celine's ears. The team rushed forward, their guns raised, but they hesitated at the threshold. Beyond the door lay what they had risked everything for, the artifact. The vault room was eerily quiet, lit by the faint, cold glow of the walls. At the center of the room stood a pedestal, upon which rested an object cloaked in a shimmering, faintly pulsing light. Celine's breath caught as she laid eyes on it. The artifact was more than just an object. It was a symbol of everything humanity had lost, and everything they hoped to reclaim. It was a crystalline orb, encased in a lattice of strange metal and pulsing with an otherworldly energy. The coordinates to Earth were encrypted within its structure, a key to unlock humanity's return to their home. Yet, as they moved closer, Celine's instincts screamed that something was wrong. "Something's off," she whispered, scanning the room. There were no guards, no traps. Everything seemed too perfect, too easy. It was as though the artifact had been waiting for them. "Just grab it," Draven said, his voice a low growl. "We can't waste time." But before anyone could move forward, the room was filled with a low hum, and the walls shimmered with an eerie light. Celine's gut twisted as the air around them seemed to thicken. Suddenly, the vault door slammed shut with a deafening clang, locking them inside. "What the hell?" Rena muttered, her eyes wide, as she turned to the others. "The vault's been sealed." A voice echoed from unseen speakers, distorted but unmistakable. "You thought you could reclaim what was never meant to be yours." Celine froze. The voice was cold, robotic, and menacing. It was the Watchers. They had anticipated their move. The vault had been a trap all along. From the shadows, a figure stepped forward, tall, imposing, its armored frame gleaming with dark energy. A Watcher agent. The same cold intelligence that had hunted humanity to the edges of the galaxy now stood before them. "I am Varn," the figure said, its voice sharp and commanding. "The artifact belongs to us, and so do you." Celine's heart sank, but she didn't hesitate. "You'll have to kill us first," she growled, her grip tightening on her blaster. The agent's expression was unreadable behind its visor, but its posture stiffened, clearly calculating. It wasn't just about the artifact anymore. The Watchers had decided humanity was a threat, and they would stop at nothing to ensure it was destroyed. The air crackled with energy as the Watcher agent prepared to strike. There was no more running, no more hiding. This was it. The battle for Earth and humanity's last stand had begun. The tension in the vault room was suffocating. The Watcher agent, Vern, loomed in front of them, his dark armor reflecting the dim, flickering lights of the vault. The weight of the moment hung heavy, as though the fate of humanity rested on the fragile balance between survival and annihilation. Celine's mind raced. The artifact was within reach, but so was death. "Move fast," Celine hissed under her breath to her team, her eyes locked on Vern. She could feel the oppressive energy that radiated from the Watcher agent, an aura of cold power that made her skin crawl. This was no ordinary soldier. This was one of the elite, and if they didn't act quickly, they'd all be dead. Varn tilted his head slightly as though savoring the moment. "You think you can defy the will of the Watchers? Your kind has no place in the universe. The age of humans is over." With a flick of his wrist, Varn activated a weapon that hummed with dark energy, a blade that glowed with the intensity of a dying star. "But you can die with dignity, at least." Celine didn't wait for him to strike. She sprang into action, signaling her team to spread out. Her blaster was already in her hand, the barrel aimed at Vern's chest. The shot rang out, a bright flash of energy, but Vern was faster. He moved with a speed that defied logic, his form a blur as he deflected the shot with a sweep of his glowing blade. The bolt ricocheted off the vault's reinforced walls, leaving a scar in the metal. Draven, always one step ahead, fired his weapon in tandem with Celine's shot, aiming for the Watcher's exposed side. But Vern was already moving again, his blade cleaving through the air in a perfect arc, blocking the shot and sending a shockwave of energy toward them. Celine barely managed to dive to the side, but the blast sent her crashing into the cold floor, her breath knocked out of her. "Captain!" Rena shouted, her voice tinged with panic. Celine quickly regained her footing, her vision spinning from the impact. "I'm fine," she growled, pushing herself back to her feet. The team wasn't so lucky. Rena had taken cover behind a nearby pillar, her blaster ineffective against Vern's energy shield, while Draven was trying to regain his footing after the shockwave. Vern's voice echoed through the vault, his tone dripping with disdain. "Foolish humans. You think you can defeat me? You can't even comprehend the power you're up against." His weapon crackled with raw energy, and he advanced toward them, his steps slow and deliberate. But Celine wasn't about to let him finish the sentence. She had faced death too many times to let it claim her now. The artifact was still within reach, just a few meters away, and it had to be theirs. "Rena, get the vault door open," Celine ordered, her voice tight with urgency. "We can't fight him here." Rena, already scanning the control panel for a way to override the lock, nodded grimly. "On it, but you'll need to keep him occupied for just a few more seconds." "Draven, cover me!" Celine shouted, already moving toward Vern, her blaster raised. She had no illusions about beating him in a direct fight, but she knew she could buy enough time for Rena to finish the override. Draven fired another series of shots, forcing Vern to raise his energy blade in defense, allowing Celine to close the distance. The Watcher agent's eyes never left her, his visor glowing as he anticipated her every move. With a flash of speed, Celine dove to the side, narrowly avoiding a swing from the energy blade. She fired off several quick shots, but Vern's blade moved like liquid, blocking each one effortlessly. Every time she fired, it felt like a losing battle, the energy of his blade burning through the air as he deflected and advanced. "Is that the best you can do?" Vern taunted, his voice cold as ice. "You are nothing but insects to us, and you will die like insects." Celine gritted her teeth. She wasn't going to let him break her spirit. Not now, not when humanity's future was so close. "Keep pushing," she shouted to Draven and Rena. The sound of Rena's frantic tapping on the console echoed through the room, but it was drowned out by the hum of Vern's blade. Celine's shots grew more frantic, desperation creeping into her every movement. She knew they didn't have much time. If Rena couldn't open the door, they'd be trapped here forever. The Watcher agent lunged forward, his blade aiming straight for Celine. She rolled to the side, narrowly avoiding the strike, but the blade sliced through the wall beside her with terrifying precision. The force of the strike left a deep gash in the metal, and the shockwave sent her crashing to the ground again. "Come on, Rena," Celine shouted, her voice hoarse from the exertion. Just as it seemed like all hope was lost, Rena's voice cut through the chaos. "It's open, now." With a final defiant cry, Celine launched herself to her feet and dove toward the pedestal. She grabbed the artifact in a swift motion, feeling the cool surface of the crystal hum with power. For a moment, everything seemed to stop, the world around them frozen in time. Then, the vault door slid open. Celine didn't waste a second. "Go!" she screamed, her heart racing as she bolted toward the exit. The team followed, fighting every step of the way, their blasters flashing as they raced to escape the deadly grasp of the Watchers. Vern's voice echoed behind them. "You cannot escape. Humanity is finished." But Celine knew, as she sprinted toward freedom, that the battle was far from over. The path to Earth had been lit. Now, all that remained was to survive long enough to claim it. The vault door slammed shut behind them, and the sound of Vern's enraged shouts echoed through the cold, metallic walls of the facility. Celine's heart pounded in her chest as she sprinted through the narrow corridor, the artifact tightly clutched in her hands. Every step felt like it could be her last. The Watchers were not ones to let their prey escape, and they would stop at nothing to hunt down anyone who dared defy them. "Move, move, move," Celine shouted to her team, her voice sharp with urgency. Draven, ever the professional, was the first to take point, his blaster raised and scanning every shadowed corner. Rena followed closely behind, her fingers flying over her wrist console to send out a distress signal to the Liberty's flame, giving them the coordinates to their location. The battle wasn't over. They had to make it back to the ship, where their only hope of survival lay. The facility was a maze of twisting corridors, and the team moved with practiced precision. They passed abandoned rooms and decaying equipment, relics of a bygone era, but there was no time to stop. The distant hum of Watcher patrols reached their ears, and the sharp clang of metal boots on the floor told them that they were closing in. Vern's forces were relentless, and Celine knew it was only a matter of time before they found their escape route. We're not going to make it, Rena muttered under her breath, her eyes darting around in search of any sign of an exit. Don't say that, Celine snapped, her breath ragged from the exertion. We make it, or we die trying. Draven stopped for a moment, pressing his back against the cold wall. I can handle a few more of them, but there's too many coming. We need that exit cleared or we'll be sitting ducks. Celine didn't hesitate. She turned toward the closest door. This leads to the cargo bay, she said, slamming her fist against the door's console. We'll take that route. The door hissed open, revealing the dimly lit space beyond, a vast, cavernous room filled with old crates and equipment. It looked like the perfect place to stage a final stand. For a brief moment, they all paused, catching their breath. Ready for a fight? Draven grinned, tightening his grip on his blaster. Always, Celine replied, her gaze fixed on the exit at the far side of the room. There was no turning back now. They moved forward, their footsteps muffled by the thick air of the cargo bay. The silence was deafening, and every sound, every creak of the walls, every rustle of air, felt like a threat. Celine's instincts screamed at her to stay alert. They were close now, so close to freedom, but also close to being surrounded by enemies. The first Watcher soldiers appeared at the far end of the room, their black armor gleaming in the dim light. They were moving in formation, cutting off any potential exits, but Celine wasn't about to let them take her down without a fight. Get to the ship, she ordered, her voice low but firm. I'll cover you. Draven and Rena didn't hesitate. They bolted for the far exit, weapons raised, eyes scanning every movement. Celine stayed behind, her heart pounding as she fired shot after shot, each blast lighting up the room. The Watcher's energy shields deflected her shots with ease, but it slowed their advance. Vern's voice crackled through their comms, his words distorted with static, but still unmistakable. You cannot escape. You cannot outrun the Watchers. You will be found, and you will fall. Celine gritted her teeth and fired again, her aim precise as she struck one of the Watchers in the chest. He staggered back, sparks flying from his armor, but he didn't go down. She fired again, this time hitting him square in the head, and he collapsed, his weapon slipping from his hands. Almost there, Rena shouted as she and Draven neared the exit. The seconds felt like hours, and the pressure of knowing the enemy was closing in was unbearable. Celine's pulse raced as she threw herself into a roll, narrowly avoiding a blast from another Watcher soldier. She popped back to her feet, her weapon raised, her mind locked on the goal, getting back to the ship. Move. She yelled at Rena and Draven as they reached the hatch. The sound of more Watchers approaching sent a chill down her spine. But then, a familiar voice came through her comm. Captain, we're almost there. It was Zane, the pilot of the Liberty's Flame. Get to the landing bay. We've got a window to make it out. Celine didn't need to be told twice. She fired one last shot, striking a soldier in the shoulder, before sprinting toward the exit. She could feel the heat of the enemy's fire at her back, but she refused to look back. Her team was nearly out, and they could make it to the ship. They reached the landing bay just in time. The hatch of the Liberty's Flame was open, the ship's engines already roaring to life. Celine dove into the cargo hold, the rest of the team following close behind. Punch it, Celine shouted. Zane didn't need to be told twice. The Liberty's Flame shot into the air, blasting through the atmosphere of Delphi 7 and into the void of space. Behind them, the facility burned, the Watchers' forces fading into the distance. For a moment, there was silence, broken only by the steady hum of the ship's engines. We made it, Rena said, her voice heavy with relief. Celine looked down at the artifact, still secure in her hands. It glowed faintly, a symbol of their victory, but she knew this was only the beginning. Earth was still out of reach, and the Watchers wouldn't stop. They had a long road ahead of them, but they had survived. And as long as they had that artifact, there was hope. Let's get to work, Celine said, her eyes hardening with determination. We're not done yet. The Liberty's flame soared through the stars, the artificial gravity keeping Celine and her team steady as they prepared for the next phase of their mission. The cold, endless expanse of space stretched before them, and Earth, a distant, dying memory, was still a galaxy away. But with the artifact secured and their resolve hardened, they were more determined than ever to reclaim their home. "Where are we heading, Captain?" Draven asked, his voice steady but tinged with the familiar undercurrent of urgency that always accompanied the final stages of their missions. Celine stood in front of the command console, staring at the holographic map of the galaxy. Their route was already plotted, through uncharted sectors, past the crumbling outposts of the old Federation, and into the heart of the Watchers' territory. They had no illusions. This was a suicide mission. "We need to hit the heart of Watcher space," she replied, her tone unwavering. "We'll use the artifact to track down the main node of their command structure. That's where we'll find the answers to how we can defeat them." Rena, sitting nearby, looked up from her console, her brow furrowed. The artifact's power could pinpoint their location, but we're talking about infiltrating the Watcher's stronghold. They'll be expecting us. "That's why we need to hit them fast and hard," Celine said, turning to face her team. "We have the advantage of surprise. They think we're scattered. It's time to show them we've only just begun." The ship hummed with energy as the team prepared for their final jump. Zane, the pilot, punched in the coordinates. Ready to breach the outer rim of their space, everyone braced for impact. The stars around them shifted, blurring into streaks of light as the Liberty's flame engaged its FTL drive, and they shot toward the Watcher's domain. Hours later, the ship emerged from faster-than-light travel, dropping out of hyperspace into the dark void of Watcher territory. Celine's breath caught in her throat as she saw the massive fleet looming on the horizon, dozens of ships, each one a testament to the Watcher's power. But there was no turning back now. "Shields up," Draven barked as the proximity alarm blared. "We've got incoming," Rena said, her voice tight with focus. "They're already launching interceptors." "Prepare to engage," Celine commanded. She turned to Zane. "Get us in range of that flagship. I want a direct hit." Zane's hands flew over the controls, his eyes locked on the rapidly approaching ships. The Liberty's flame ducked and weaved through incoming fire, dodging plasma blasts as Celine's team armed their weapons. "Firing!" Draven shouted, targeting the enemy interceptors with expert precision. The ship's weapon systems hummed to life, unleashing a barrage of energy blasts that decimated the small fighters. But the larger Watcher warships were closing in, their massive forms now looming overhead. "Brace for impact!" Zane yelled as a massive plasma beam struck the ship's hull, sending the crew crashing against their harnesses. "We've got to fight our way in," Celine said through gritted teeth, her eyes blazing with fury. "Draven, Rena, prepare the boarding charges. We're going in." The team moved with practiced efficiency, deploying explosive charges designed to breach the flagship's hull. Celine watched the countdown on her wrist display as the timer ticked down. 3, 2, 1, go. The charges detonated with a deafening blast, sending shockwaves through the ship. The hull buckled, and the air vented in a rush of pressure. The team, clad in battlesuits, stormed through the breach as smoke and debris filled the air. Inside the flagship, the team fought tooth and nail through narrow corridors, encountering heavy resistance from Watcher forces. They moved with precision, clearing rooms and cutting down any opposition that stood in their way. "Keep pushing," Celine shouted as they advanced deeper into the heart of the flagship. The corridors were eerily quiet, the distant sound of enemy footsteps the only indication of their presence. They reached the command center, an enormous, cold chamber filled with advanced technology and towering control consoles. At the far end, a figure stood silhouetted against a vast holographic display. It was Vern, the Watcher agent they had encountered earlier. "You should have stayed out of this," Vern's voice echoed in the chamber, his tone both cold and mocking. "You're too late, Captain. The Watchers have already won." Celine's eyes narrowed. "You underestimate humanity." Without warning, she lunged forward, her blaster raised. Vard deflected the shot effortlessly with a flick of his blade, but Celine didn't stop. She moved with ferocity, drawing on every ounce of training she had. This was the moment, the one where everything would change. Vard met her blow with one of his own, a swift strike that nearly knocked her off her feet. But Celine, fueled by a burning desire to protect her people, retaliated with a series of brutal blows. They were evenly matched in skill, but Celine's determination was unyielding. The fate of humanity depended on her. She couldn't afford to lose. With a final surge of energy, Celine disarmed Vern, sending his blade skittering across the floor. In one swift motion, she aimed her blaster at his chest. "This ends now," she said, her voice low and deadly. Vern's expression faltered for the first time. "You're a fool," he spat. Celine fired. The blast pierced Vern's chest, and the Watcher agent collapsed, his body slumping to the floor. "Good riddance," Celine muttered, wiping the sweat from her brow. She turned to her team, her eyes alight with triumph. "It's over. We've won." But as the lights in the flagship flickered, a new transmission began to play, a holographic message from the Watcher High Command. The war, it seemed, was far from over. "The real fight begins now," Celine whispered. She turned back to her team, the fire in her eyes burning brighter than ever. "We'll take back Earth. We'll take back the galaxy." And so, with the Watchers' stronghold shattered and their leader fallen, humanity's fight to reclaim their home continued.